Hello, everyone. Welcome to How Well Are You, the talk show. I am your host, Cynthia Mobley Howell, your mental health advocate, who's lending my voice to eradicate the stigma of mental illness, one show at a time. We have a great show for you this evening, so make sure you like and share. In case you don't know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're taking advantage of this time to keep the conversation going about mental wellness. As many of you know, I've written a book, Crazy Didn't Get Me, Preparation for My Destiny, which is soon to be released. Yay! Can somebody type that in the chat? Yay! So, my book details my experience growing up in a home with severely mental ill siblings. You see, I'm one of four, the youngest and the only girl, and all my brothers were affected by mental illness. One was bipolar, and the other two schizophrenic. Tonight, I'm going to be sharing a riveting excerpt from one of the chapters in my book that involves an event that happened with my brothers. Let me warn you, this content is not for the faint at heart. So if you're fragile, you may want to go ahead and log off now. I'm just saying what I'm saying. So, did you know that 1 in 5 US adults are living with a mental illness? That equates to over 50 million people that's affected. Youth report suffering from at least one major depressive episode in the year prior to this report and from the Mental Health Alliance, and more than 2.7 million youth are dealing with major depression. Remember, I said I was the only girl out of the siblings, right? So, yes, I was a daddy's girl. You very seldom saw my daddy without seeing me if I had anything to do with it. Even went to work with him at times when I wasn't in school. Daddy did lawn care, and he was masterful at his craft. I loved and adored my daddy so much. He was my hero. I loved everything about him. I loved him so much that I couldn't imagine life without him. I remember regularly praying to God, and I'm serious, y'all. I prayed to God to let me die before daddy died. Because if he died before I did, I wouldn't be able to handle it. That's how much I love my daddy. So, what I witnessed him doing on that particular day threw me into a momentary state of confusion. And it was very, very hard for me to wrap my little 8-year old mind around what I saw. Now, joining me this evening is Mr. Gregory S. Dossie, who is the founder and director of the Student Advocacy, or should I say, he is the founder and director, let me get it right, of Student Advocacy Center, Inc. And I'm going to read just a brief bio. This man is, his bio could keep us here for 2 hours. So I'm just going to extract some from his bio, and then we are going to move on because Greg and I are going to have some good conversation. He's going to be talking about Bullycide. Yes, I said Bullycide. And so, not to prolong the time, Gregory is the founder and director of Student Advocacy Center, Inc., as I mentioned before. He's also a public adjuster, content specialist, and a I can't read my own writing, y'all. He's the founder of Soul, that is Save Our Urban Land, and he is a community and civil rights advocate. He is a native of Florida, that is Bay County, Florida. He has matriculated through so many institutions of higher learning that I can't name them all. One being Sacramento State University. Um, he also, at where he majored in digital multimedia curriculum, and he had to return home to take care of his ailing mother. So he was had 1 year to complete his bachelor's. But if you know this man, he doesn't need all of that because he knows what he knows. San Hoen Delta College, and I probably pronounced that wrong. Sawyer College of Business. I mean, I can just go on and on and on and on. He is a very accomplished gentleman. I'm going to go ahead and bring him on in right now. And so I would like for my listening audience to go ahead and welcome Mr. Gregory S. Dossie. Hey Greg, how you doing?
Doing fine. I had to look around and see who you were talking about with all those things going on.
I'm talking about you, my brother. And let me just mention this. I got to mention this. Greg and I have known each other since literally since grade school. We have known each other since grade school. So we have been riding for a very, very long time. I mean, we're just friends. He's my brother. That's all I gotta say. So imagine like 60 years, over 60 years. I ain't gonna
I'm
tell
not
his
that old.
age. I'll just tell mine. Over 60 years of friendship. I mean, that is phenomenal. So I'm going to go ahead and get into this excerpt, and then Greg and I are going to have a discussion about what I read, and we're going to go from there. And we love your interaction. I see your comments, and I'm not ignoring you. Trust me, I'm going to address all of your comments, but we're going to go ahead and get started. So, the excerpt that I'm reading is from chapter 5 of my book. And no, I don't remember the name of it right off the bat, but that's not important. So, again, let me warn you that the content, as far as I'm concerned, is pretty strong. So, if you if you are faint at heart, then you probably want to go ahead and log off. I'm gonna give you another chance. The second and only time, the second and only other time that I witnessed Daddy doing something incredibly shocking and appalling to my brothers was when Daddy's silver dollar collection went missing. For some reason, when he couldn't find his collection, he automatically assumed that one of my brothers had stolen it. After asking each of them several times if they had taken it, and they all insisted they hadn't, Daddy decided somebody was lying. And since he couldn't get them to simply tell the truth, he was going to beat the truth out of them. I don't know which incident was worse, the incident with Daddy pounding Dwight's head into the hearth, or the one I'm about to tell you about. So go ahead and strap on your seatbelt because you're about to go for a discomforting ride. Everyone had sort of been deceived into thinking that all was well since Daddy calmly walked away from the situation and outside to his truck after not being able to get a truthful answer from my brothers. Little did any of us know what was running through his mind. And if we had known, perhaps a cry to God for some serious intervention would have gone up to the heavens. Daddy eventually came back inside the house, and in his hands, he was carrying a couple of the ropes that he used for securing equipment onto his truck bed. Of course, we were all very curious as to what he intended to do with these ropes. Sadly, his plans for those ropes would turn into actions by him that should have landed him underneath the county jail, or maybe even prison for a very long time. He first instructed my brothers to strip off all of their clothes, and I do mean all of them, including underwear. And surprisingly, they complied. He then tied their wrists with one of the ropes to the old upright black piano that was in our dining room. I often wondered why my brothers were so compliant with his wishes to strip naked and then be tied to the piano like animals. Mind you, my brothers were not little kids, but teenagers. It wasn't like they couldn't have resisted. And if push came to shove, the three of them together surely could have easily overpowered Daddy. Now, they would likely afterwards have suffered the consequences of those actions, but perhaps it would have deterred him from what he ended up doing to them. So, as dumb sheep being led to a slaughter, they simply obeyed Daddy's wishes and allowed themselves to be tied to the piano with the rope. I can tell you that there is absolutely no way in the world that I would have consented to that. He would have had to catch me first. So, with one rope, he bound them to the piano, and with the other rope, he started thrashing them while repeatedly demanding a confession from who had taken his silver dollar collection. This whipping went on for what seems like a lifetime, and no one was owning up to the disappearance of that coin collection. Daddy finally realized that no one was going to confess to taking the silver dollar collection, and thank God, what was left of his good senses kicked in and he stopped whipping them before he seriously injured or killed them. Now, you're going to have to get the book to hear how that ended, but that happened. That actually happened. And as I was writing the book and I was sharing this particular incident, I just lost it because I'm like, wow, that really happened. That really happened. So, Greg, tell me, what do you think?
Well, this leaves me speechless, and it kind of brings back some memories because this type of thing went on in a lot of black households. And so I can relate to the sheep being led to the slaughter type thing. And maybe prior to you being of age to realize maybe they had tried to jump him individually or separately and suffered consequences. So that could possibly have been a learned behavior for them just to comply. Or, maybe your mother had told them, just, you know, get it over with, it'll end eventually. There could be so many things running through their mind.
So, when we talk about mental illness and the different ways that may contribute to people being affected, because we know that it can be biological, it can be psychological, it can be environmental. Scientists have not really nailed it down to the exact cause of mental health issues. But the reason why I mention that is because even though before that time, there had been some signs of some mental health issues with my brothers, but I can only imagine how being abused, let's call it what it is, and anybody that knows me knows that I keep it not 100, I keep it 1,000. So being having been abused in that fashion, it's no wonder they suffered mental illnesses or were affected by mental illnesses. I know a couple of my brothers experimented with drugs, but this was later on in life. This was after some things had happened, but at a very young age, which no one uh, addressed it or perhaps recognized it, they were dealing with symptoms of a mental health, of a mental illness. But going back to what I said, I can only imagine how being whipped like an animal could have contributed to what happened. And like you said, as quiet as it is kept in a lot of African American homes, and probably if we talk to some other races, they'll probably say, we had some of that going on too. We just assume that, that was a thing that happened in African American homes primarily. But just from speaking to different other races, sometimes I'm surprised at some of the things that I mentioned to them. And I said, well, in our culture, this happened. And they were like, that happened with us too. But how in the world could someone, without getting some good therapy, manage to be normal after dealing with that type of thing? And that's just one incident that I shared with you all. That was not
Uh,
the only one.
Let me interject. And
Mhm.
part of the drug use could have been a result of the abuse.
Mhm.
And then I've often heard that this type of abuse goes back as far as slavery. So that could be like a learned behavior. So, as we know, or if you don't know, don't be surprised to find out now that a lot of slave, the enslaved owners use blacks or African Americans to beat the other slaves. And oftentimes, some of those beatings were worse than the owner of the enslaved would be. So that could be a learned behavior that's been passed down and passed down from generation to generation. So maybe what they saw as a little kid, uh, it's that learned behavior and it's passed on down. That's just an opinion of mine.
And you know what? And you know what? That's a very valid observation, because as you were speaking, what occurred to me was, as far as my daddy, what in the world happened to him? As my cousin used to say about a situation that he was in, a relational situation. Who scarred him? Who scarred him? You have to wonder, and I never to be honest, I never really considered that a thought or thought about that until you said what you just said. And as you were speaking, I'm sitting here thinking, what happened to daddy? What did he experience that would cause him to act in such a manner? And yes, you mentioned about the whole slavery situation, and I heard that and I got that. And you're right. You're right because of what we as Black people had to endure. So now here it is, you're a parent, and we have this saying, parenting doesn't come with a manual. Oh my God. But oh, how a lot of us wish that it had. A lot of us parents and a lot of the children, being on the other end of it. Oh, how we wish that it did come with a manual, because some of the things that children have had to endure at the hands of parents who just didn't have a clue, or unthinkable, unspeakable. And most people are not going to speak about it. But as you know, my mantra is I'm not keeping quiet anymore. And in order for us to end, and the word that I like to use is even more powerful, to eradicate the stigma surrounding mental health issues or mental illness, we have to have these hard conversations. And I know a lot of people are very uncomfortable because the saying is, what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. And I say the heck with that, because there are too many people that's suffering in silence, and we have to talk about it.
Yeah, as you stated earlier, what your mantra is, you're not being quiet anymore. But we were always taught, instead of what stays in Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in the house stays in the house, and that not only goes from physical abuse, but it goes sexual abuse and different things like that. And there are a lot of uh, sisters that were really, let me get this right, uh, parents and different things like that of the child. They would, let's try and get it right. The father would sleep with his daughter and they would have the baby. And so a lot of that went on. So that's the sexual abuse. You have the emotional abuse where they're talking down on the person like that, and that hurts. To me, a mental and emotional abuse hurts worse than a physical abuse, because eventually a physical abuse will stop hurting, but that mental
Mhm.
abuse is going to
Wow.
go on 24/7, and it keeps going on whether
Wow.
you're asleep, whether you're awake or not. It's still going to keep going on, and that's easily triggered. Like if you forget about it and that person's out of your life, may have gone out of town for a week or two, and they come back, then you get that trigger again, and that's just like pouring salt on the wound. That mental trigger, that emotional trigger starts all over again, and it's an endless cycle.
Wow. You just said a whole mouthful right there. I like when you said the with the physical abuse, once that wound heals, the pain goes away. You don't feel it anymore because that physical wound has healed. Now, you may see a scar perhaps, and when you see that scar, you're reminded of how you got that scar. But that mental thing, that stuff that's in your head, never ever goes away. And one of the things that we don't talk about in the Black or the African American community, we're talking about it more now since the pandemic, is professional treatment. I remember when I was living in Pittsburgh and I was driving Uber, and this young lady got in my car and she just started like, she was a Caucasian. She was Caucasian. And she was just rattling off about her therapist and, her psychiatrist. And I was kind of taken aback because at the time I wasn't really being vocal about this whole mental health piece. And I'm thinking, wow, she's just telling me all her business. I mean, she was telling it all. And one of the problems in the African American community is that thing about, we don't want people to know what's going on. In the meantime, as I said before, people are suffering in silence. Even people, someone on here, I see, I'm looking at the Facebook viewers and I see the number five viewers. Well, remember, statistics say 1 in 5 US adults are living with a mental illness. So, what does that mean? If there's 5 people viewing right now, at least one of those persons is living with a mental illness. Is that a bad thing? No, it is what it is. When someone has a physical illness, we ain't tripping. We ain't like, oh, they got cancer. Ooh, Lord, we don't want to talk about it. I mean, some people do the, privacy with things like that. They do. But you understand what I'm talking about. So, one person viewing this live stream, at least one of those persons is dealing with a mental health issue.
And what I like to say too is that we don't talk. And I was listening to your conversation last show with Evangelist Lamb Massalina, and he was talking about the black, and the subject was the ministry and help religious or faith-based and mental
Bridging the
health.
gap between the faith-based and mental health communities. Mhm.
Right. One thing that I found, especially as being a student advocate, I get called to people from different churches that won't talk to their ministers, their preachers, because they don't want to be the subject of the sermon of, of the next
Mm,
Sunday or a couple of Sundays
mm.
down. And churches, even if you have a couple of hundred people in there, if you start talking about a person's problem, 10 or 15 at a minimal are going to know exactly who you're talking about. And then, like now we have therapists and psychiatrists and all that look like us. I've gone to psychiatrists. I've had an article done on me that went national and international regarding my mental health. I like to call my mental health injury because that doesn't sound as threatening or long term as a mental health illness dealing
Okay.
with Hurricane Michael. If we have an injury, we look at that as being short term. And we're
Mhm.
gonna go to the doctor, maybe go to therapy, and then we go on. So my mental health injury with the hurricane, I was in my house for 4.5 hours for Hurricane Michael. There was a 60-foot pine tree, maybe 10, probably less than 10 feet, 8 to 10 feet from my front door. I had a screened-in porch, and it was being uprooted. And my neighbor said 10 more minutes, and it would have fell. So I went to a psychiatrist to get uh, coping mechanisms to get help. So my injury was healed for a while, but I'll be honest, whenever those thunderstorms with lightning and heavy thunder come, my PTSD kicks in, but I come out of it quicker because I know how by going to the therapy, I know how to deal with my injury. Now, if we say illness, we think that's a long-term thing. So maybe if we start saying mental health injury and make that be short-term, we can go to a therapist for our injury because we know there's an end to our mental health injury and we go back to being normal. Maybe we'll have a little scar, but we'll be a lot better.
I love that. First of all, thank you so much for your transparency and your vulnerability because, being an African American male man and you are being seen globally right now. And for you to say what you just said, oh my God. Phew. I just need to breathe for just a second. I just need to breathe for just a second. But again, you just said something. When we start referring to it as an injury, because an injury, as you said, is something that happens, we heal from it, and we keep moving. We see it as a short-term situation. But when we refer to something as an illness, we see it as long term. And so when we see something as long term, sometimes we feel like there's no hope or it's futile or this is going to go on and on and on and on forever. I'm never going to come out of this. So I love how you said perhaps we should change the terminology and start referring to it as a mental health injury versus a mental illness. Because after all, who wants to be ill? Nobody wants to be injured either. But I believe that because of our psyche and how our mind interprets words and how we process words, and uh, because words are so powerful and words can make or break you, scripture says that death and life is in the power of the tongue. So to refer to it as an injury versus an illness, I like that. And so when you see that in any of my content, I'm going to make sure and give you the credit the first time, but after that, it's mine. I'm on you, unless
I
you
don't
know.
need the credit. I'm sure someone thought of it before me.
Wow, that's very good. Well, wow, this is, ah, you know, you already know that. Just so my listening audience knows, Greg is actually going to be my guest in January of 2024, and he's going to be talking about the youth and mental wellness. And so during that time, he's going to be able to share a lot more. But we're going to take a short break right now, and we're going to come back. And when we come back, Greg is going to have the floor, and he's going to talk to us about Bullycide. Yes, I said Bullycide. When we come back, we're going to talk about Bullycide. Greg is going to explain to us what that is, and I'm just going to give him the floor, and he's just going to go with it and talk to us on this subject. And I can't wait to hear it because I had never even heard that word until I had a conversation with you and you mentioned it. And I'm like, oh my God. So I know that you have a lot to share on that. Your work with the youth in the community, outside of the community, is stellar. You so relate. Uh, we see some t-shirts hanging up there behind us, and I know that you're going to definitely tell us what that's all about. But we're going to take a short break, and after the break, Greg is going to talk to us about Bullycide. We'll see you in a minute. How Well Are You? The talk show where we are ending the stigma surrounding mental injuries one show at a time. We have with us Mr. Gregory S. Dossie, who is the founder and director of Advocacy Center, Inc. And we are having a great conversation. But right now, we're going to relinquish the floor to Mr. Dossie, and he's going to talk to us about a word or a term or a situation that I had not heard of until I spoke to him. He's going to be talking to us about bullycide. Take it away, Mr. Dossie.
All right, thank you. My organization is Student Advocacy Center Incorporated. I started it back in August 2011, and since then we've assisted over 600 people by word of mouth. It used to be Student Advocacy Center Bay County Incorporated, but I've assisted people all over the state of Florida, parts of Georgia, Alabama, Texas, and even as far away as Alaska. Um, what and my motto or mantra is preventing kid mistakes from having adult consequences, because a lot of times, kids make a mistake because the brains normally don't develop until you're around age 25, so you make those mistakes and all. But the schools have started to discipline students a lot more, and people may think I'm this nice, quiet type person. I don't even think Cynthia knew how bad I really was. But there's a statistic that says 17% of kids who are involved with bullying are both aggressors and victims of bullies. I was both. Third grade, and I lived 3 blocks from the school I went to. It was all black until the 6th grade. Third grade, there was this boy. He met me every day after school. It's almost like he had it on the calendar. Beat Greg's behind. So no matter which way I went, he would beat me up. And I was sick one day, and he came to try and fight me. And I turned the tables on him, and I didn't have to worry about him anymore. So 6th grade, when the schools became integrated, I became the bully at that time. And so I was one of those 17%. So over the years of helping people, like in 2014, I first came across the terminology bullycide when there was this either 12 or 14-year-old girl down south jumped off the top of a building because of bullycide. And bullycide is defined as committing suicide as a result of being bullied. And I think statistics show that there are like 80% of students say they have been bullied or witnessed people being bullied. And also 50% of students say that they saw physical abuse at home, and that could lead to violence displayed at school, much like what Cynthia saw at her home. And she could have very easily turned that uh, onto somebody else at school. And we hear a lot about school shootings and stuff like that. And I know you go back as far back as Columbine, where the people that were dressed as Gothics did the shooting, and that's where we first heard about school mass shootings. Uh, and that's because they reached out and there was nothing done, so they took matters into their own hands. And statistics, I'm big on statistics. So 75% of school shootings incidents in the U.S. have been linked to bullying and harassment. So what is bullying and harassment? Where somebody's being picked on both physically and emotionally. Uh, they're being teased a lot. um, the authority figure like a parent, a teacher, uh, something like that is always picking on them. Group bullying, where several people in the bullies group will pick on them, and the list goes on and on and on. So let's see, the ages where bullying is the biggest is 10 to 14. And so that's right around fourth, fifth grade to like the eighth grade. And one of the people that unfortunately I had let me get it right, yeah. Her name was Gabrielle Green, and this is a shirt from her uh, 5K Foundation. On June 2nd, I believe she would have been 18, but she was 12 years old when she committed Bullycide. And the sad thing about it is it was on a Wednesday. She was happy because she was getting ready to go to Bible study with her parents and all. She had came out, they were having, nice conversation. There were no warning signs on that particular day. She went back in her room. She got on the phone with somebody, and they were bullying her. And back when Miss Howell was growing up, and myself, I'll go and confess to that, we could go home after school and not worry about being bullied. But now with cyber social media, bullying goes on 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. And so it's never turned off. And so this young lady, she, when it came time for them to go to Wednesday evening service, she couldn't be found. They ran around the house looking for her. And then I believe it was one of her siblings went in the room and they found her in her closet hung. And it was just that quick. And and the sad thing about it, what happened at the school, and this did happen here in Bay County in Panama City, Florida. At the school the next day, they had signs that if you need counseling, they're available there, but they didn't say what you needed counseling for. People that wanted to talk about Gabby committing suicide, they were threatened to be sent home. And when you try and hush a situation, and also last year there was another young lady that was about 14 years old here, also in Bay County. She committed suicide as well. And I can understand the media for not listing a lot of the suicides on the news like they do the homicides and stuff, but you can't keep it hush hush because it affects those students there. And sometimes it'll start a domino effect. And that domino effect is like, okay, this person got a lot of attention out of it, so I'm gonna die and go on. And what you have to do instead of being hush hush, you have to ask them 3 questions. Ask them straight out 3 questions. If you notice a change in their behavior, 1 question, straight out: are you planning on committing suicide? Or if they're younger, do you plan on harming yourself? If they say yes, how do you plan on doing it? And if they have a plan, the third question you have to ask them, do you have the means to carry it out? So if they say, I'm going, and parents or the person talking can tell, but if they're at school, then they'll have to check with the parents if they have the means. If they say they're going to kill themselves with a gun, Is there a gun that they can have access to? Or if they're going to cut themselves with a knife, we know everybody have kitchen knives. So you have to suicide proof your house, but most importantly, you have to get them help right away. That's it. If they answer yes to all three of those questions, get them help immediately. Here in Florida, we have a law called the Baker Act, which is an involuntary commitment for up to 72 hours. Get them help right away. But sometimes, like I had this one student, she would always say, if she gets frustrated, she would say, I'm going to commit suicide. Well, that's the equivalent of me getting frustrated and saying, I'm going to need to go see my bartender. So she wasn't really saying she was going to commit suicide. And I told the school that, but I also told the school that every time she says that, you have to assess it and see if she's really talking about that, because the one time you don't do that assessment could be the one time that she really means it. And so, you just have to do that. So you have to follow through. You have to know your kids. Uh, there are kids that are 5 to 9 years old that commit bullycide, commit suicide, but they don't understand the reality of death is permanent. Why? How many times have my generation seen Willie Coyote and the Road Runner? How many times have they been blown up and come back to life? And I'm sure there are other cartoons and things like that where kids see this, okay, I'm going to die. But in their mind, they're thinking what's going on in the cartoon. So I'll be coming back to life. But that doesn't happen like that. That's TV, that's fiction. So you have to, keep an eye on their behavior. Uh, are they distanced? Ask your kids about their days at school. How was your day at school? If you talk to your kid, you can know something's wrong. We're so stuck on social media, letting everybody do their phones. We're sitting at the dinner table. Everybody has a phone, texting and stuff. And Cynthia knows I hate texting. you know?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But we need to go back to where we talk to each other, because when we talk to each other, we can see the emotions in each other. And we can tell if your child suddenly doesn't want to go to school, or if your child's going to school, but you keep getting these calls that your child is not in school, your child is missing this class. You need to have that conversation with your child. Why aren't you going to school? I mean, it could be something where, they're not dealing with the lessons, they're having problems with the teacher, whatever. But oftentimes it's they're being bullied, and if they're on their phones and stuff like that, and their demeanor changes to sadness after they're on the phone, then you have to do something about that.
Let
So
me stop you right there for just a second, Greg, and ask you a question, because this question popped in my mind while you were talking about, the whole dinner table situation, and
mhm,
everybody's at the dinner table with their heads in their phones, which that was unspoken of in our day. And nobody's having a conversation, but then the parents are getting calls from the schools. They're not in school, or their grades are suffering. What could be going on with parents these days? Let's address that. What could be going on with parents these days, where we the parents don't seem to be attentive? I know one answer that I can come up with right off the bat is we have children raising children
mhm,
nowadays. But what are some of the issues that you've seen, that you've detected whenever you've encountered these situations and you're doing your advocacy, and you observe parents, what are some of the behaviors or what are some things that you've detected from parents that you believe could be a contributing factor in them not paying more attention to what is going on with their child who could potentially be dealing with bully, being bullied, thus uh, they may be in a situation where they'll commit bullycide.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question, and we'll touch on that more in January. But someone pointed out to me, you've seen the movie Lean on Me with Joe Clark, right?
Yes.
Everybody, including me at first, was happy when all those people got kicked out of school, right? And the school became calm and they did well. But this person asked me, what happened to those people that got kicked out of the school? We never ever think about that. And if you look at the age range of those people that got kicked out of the school, they're mid 40s and up. So we hear about, why do parents go to the schools and they blame the teachers for what happened? They're only going on what their experience was, because when Lean on Me came out and Joe Clark kicked everybody out of school, that, a domino effect all across the United States. So these people, they have in their mind, uh, the teachers don't care for us. We were trying, naturally there were some bad apples, but some people just get caught up with those guilt by association. So you have that guilt by association. So now these people aren't paying attention to their children. They don't really care about the school situation, and they may look at the schools as a way of, okay, I'm getting these kids out of my hair for a little bit. I'm gonna let them deal with them because I'm a kid raising a kid. So I had this baby 16 to mid 20s. I haven't really had time to live. So I want to live. This is my break and all. So, that's one of the main things that's happening with that, because of what happened to them and their school experience is how they're looking at what's going on in the school. So they don't see these signs of their kids. We give our kids cell phones, iPads, games, switches, different things like that, so that they can be out of our hair. We go out, we go get drunk, we smoke, we get high, different things like that. And then sometimes when the kids get old enough, we all smoke together, we all drink together. And it doesn't matter whether they go to school or not, because I know how they did me in school as a parent. So, long as they, don't be in my hair, I'm fine with them going or not going to school, if that makes any sense.
That makes perfectly good sense. It makes perfectly good sense. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. We have got to get in the trenches and do what needs to be done to save this generation, because this generation has a lot of potential. Oh my gosh, they are so bright, they are so gifted, they are so talented, but they are up against so much. Wow, I see that we're getting to the top of the hour and there's just so much that we can talk about. But again, you're going to be back in January and you'll be able to really dig in. But what are some final words that you can share with us, Greg, regarding this whole bully side situation? what are some final words that you can share with us that can help us to be more attuned to what's going on and to be able to understand what we as community, because even though we don't say it and it seems like we don't ascribe to it as much as we used to, but it still does take a village, and we have to get back to that. So what are some final words that you have for us on this whole bully side situation?
First and foremost, we have to pay attention to our kids. That means talking with them, taking away the technological, electronic devices, have that family time, notice their demeanor. If they don't want to go to school, if they have a bad day at school on a regular basis, uh, get your counselors involved. The most effective parents or grandparents or guardians are the ones who are active in their students' lives. For example, we just sued Bay District Schools and we won on that because the parent was involved in their child's life. And that parent would not give up, and come to find out that about 5 years ago, that parent asked for an evaluation of their child. Their word was an analysis of their child. And the district said, well, because you didn't say evaluation, that didn't count. No, it's the same. So,
Yeah.
but you have to stay on them, get someone to go advocate on your behalf. Uh, like I say, it's just, you got to know your child and go back all the way to their cum folders. If they're acting up, is there something that's been happening there? And don't just say, what I've seen a lot of people do, they don't act this way at home, so they just doing this at school. No, they don't have the triggers at home like they have at school. The work may be too overwhelming for them. There's somebody that's bothering them, that's bullying them. Uh, if they all of a sudden, are real depressed and things like that, and then they become happy and they start giving away stuff like that, that's a sign that they could be thinking of, I'm not going to be around long, so I'm giving away my favorite toy, I'm giving away my favorite article of clothing, I'm giving away my iPad, whatever. So those are signs that to look for, where they may be considering bullycide or suicide. And I think they just came up with a number to call for suicide prevention. I believe that's 811. Uh, so you don't have to do that suicide prevention, the whole number,
It's
but you need,
actually, if we're thinking about the same number, it's actually
yeah,
988 if we're thinking about the same number.
988. Yeah, that's
Mhm,
it, 988. So
mhm.
call 988. If you're thinking about it, parents, if you have any questions, call and think about it. We have to get over the stigma of blacks don't go to therapy. There are a lot of mental health injuries, as well as there are some illnesses, but we're going to look at the injury first, and if there's something deeper, then let the therapist or the psychiatrist determine if it's an illness. But get your treatment.
Wow. Wow. That is some good stuff. So I've you can see Greg's email address there on the screen. So if you need to reach out to him, you can reach out to him via that email address. And what other ways? I know you're on social media, so what other ways?
We
Um,
just leave it at studentadvocate.bay@gmail.com for now, because I actually am stepping back from doing the individual advocate work, because it's been taxing on me. So I'm taking like a mental break because I'm dealing with other people's problems all the time. So, and that's another point out. If you feel you're being overwhelmed mentally, take a step back. There are other people that can do what you do. So, and then
Wait a
I
minute,
have
wait a minute, wait a minute. You ran past that just a little bit too fast. We're gonna take 1 minute, we're gonna rewind the tape, and then we're gonna get out of here. What did you just say? There are other people that what? What did you just say?
that, that can do what you do. And
Y'all
so,
heard that, didn't you?
yeah. And, I have an attorney, but, she's for more serious things and all, but there are people around in the community that can do this as well. So take care of your mental health yourself.
Wow, I love it. Thank you so much, Gregory. This has been, woo, this has been, oh my goodness. I, I, I don't even have words. Hey, Mr. Massolino, thanks for
Oh, and
joining
yeah,
us.
and then I'm gonna do some props out to him. One thing I forgot to do is he does, and I don't know if you're still doing this, but there's a mental health first aid for adults and a mental health first aid for youth. If you get the opportunity to take that class, take that class. It'll tell you just like a regular first aid class, it's mental health first aid. So you'll see the small signs are what happens in a crisis until you can get them to a therapist.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And y'all, there you have it. There you have it.
Well, thank
So
you for having me.
absolutely, and thank you for being here. I don't think I said that. I was so excited. I don't even think I thanked you. But I appreciate you so much. I appreciate you so
Uh,
much. Greetings to you again,
Greetings, Lynn.
Felino. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you so much, our brother. We appreciate you so much.
Yeah.
So we're going to end here. But as I said, Greg is going to be coming back in January 2024, and that'll be here before you know it. And he's going to be talking to us about the youth and mental health. Again, if you need to reach out to him, his
Yeah.
email address is, let me put that back up on the screen for just 1 second. And
And we also have a Facebook page, Student Advocacy Center Incorporated.
okay, perfect, perfect, wonderful, wonderful. So, this has been Cynthia Howell with How Well Are You, the talk show. I am your host, and we are ending the stigma surrounding mental injuries, one show at a time. We've had our brother Gregory Dossie with us of the student. I keep wanting to say the, but I'm not going to put
Oh, wait,
that
I
in
always
there.
say I always say the Student Advocacy Center. So
Okay, so there you go, the Student Advocacy Center, Inc. Again, we want to thank you so much for being with us this evening. And remember this, I'm not keeping quiet anymore. Have an awesome, awesome rest of your day, evening, morning, depending on the part of the country from where you're listening, and be well.